Oh, if it's bigger, it's better. If it's shinier, more spotted.
Right.
Like we think we use our vision for that, but God's vision is beyond that. It's like he sees what's in us to know what kind of fruit we're going to bear.
Welcome to another episode of The Table of Content, where we talk about all things We Are One Body Audio Theater. I am one of your hosts, Albert Saenz. Always so good to be with you. And today we have the pleasure of my counterpart, my other co-host, being Karrie Fetter, our writer-director here for We Are One Body Audio Theater. Karrie, it is so good to have you at the Table of Content. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. I'm honored to be here.
How are you today?
Oh, it's wonderful to be here at the beginning of summer, and we have lots of things going on at the Audio Theater. So
It is busy. It is busy, busy, busy.
it is, but it's exciting. We're seeing a lot of new faces, and our volunteers are always so much fun. So that adds a little spice to our day. So I enjoy it.
Yeah. If you have not been keeping up with We Are One Body Audio Theater, check our social medias, check our YouTube. Lots coming up. We're trying to keep up with a lot of different productions. So definitely, as Karrie said, it's a busy summer, and it's just going to keep actually being busy through the rest of the year. So keep an eye on everything that we're doing. But today we are going to discuss another Aesop. We love Aesop here. The Fox and the Leopard. And as usual, a little bit of text and a lot of content, right? So it's so short, actually. But if you haven't watched the recording that we did of it, please go to our YouTube channel, go to our Facebook, go to our website. It was read by Ian Floyd. So pause, go listen to it, and then come back, and then you can continue the discussion here. But Karrie, even for those who have gone and listened to it, it's so short. Would you mind actually just reading it?
Sure. The fox and the leopard disputed which was the more beautiful of the two. The leopard exhibited one by one the various spots which decorated his skin. The fox, interrupting him, said, "And how much more beautiful than you am I, who am decorated not in body, but in mind." The moral is people are not to be judged by their coats. The end.
The end. So I'll start with you, Karrie, because I have my own sort of thoughts and notes. But what did you sort of immediately take away from this Aesop?
I guess my first instinct is that we're so easily persuaded with things, like just so easily, I guess, deceived is a better word. So when we view things, our eyes get really big and we think, oh, this is, what we see in front of us. But the more, I think I could look at this story in two different ways, either from the leopard's perspective or the fox's perspective, where, if you think about the first thing that actually comes to mind are houses. I know that might seem peculiar because it's not a person or an animal, but I think about, how you view them from the outside and what they look like. And then once you get inside, that could be a whole different story. But thinking about if a house is filled with love and people talking, or just, is it really a home or is it just a house? And so some homes look beautiful on the outside, really grand, and, and you think, wow, this is an amazing neighborhood, the whole thing. But then maybe inside there's no furniture, or the people rarely talk to each other, or you don't have that cozy feeling when you go inside. And that can be wrong. So there's all sorts of versions that could be out there, for both. But I think that it's important for us to realize that, the world sort of tells us to look for that outer, the tombstone that's whitewashed and what it's really covering, what's inside of that person. So, um, but then at the same time, you kind of, I guess maybe I should pause there before I get into the other side of it. But
No, no, that's fine. No, I think the house is a good example, right? And um, how do we treat our exterior versus our interior life, right?
mhm,
And I mean, we're told, right, that we as humans, we're temples of the Holy Spirit, right? So inside of us dwells this connection to God, this very strong, this very real connection to God, and not so much. It doesn't say your exterior life is a is a temple. It's a, you inside. This our interior is where the Holy Spirit dwells, where the Lord dwells. Inside. We go to confession. We receive the sacrament of communion, and the Lord is inside of us, right? Inside of us, and it doesn't that statement, the sacraments aren't contingent upon, well, how's your exterior? You know, how's it going? Is your hair nice? Is your skin spotted?
mhm.
Do you have a physical disability? Oh, well, then there's going to be an issue with Jesus. It's like, no, like Jesus is not interested in your physical.
Mhm.
He's interested in the interior life. It's like saying, you go buy a white T-shirt at Walmart for, I don't know, $5, or you could go and get a white T-shirt from, is it Neiman Marcus or Saks Fifth Avenue, something, and spend $80 on a white T-shirt. Be
Yeah.
like, look, I'm wearing an $80 white T-shirt. Well, that's great. It's still a white T-shirt. That in the end of the day, the $5 white T-shirt and the $80 white T-shirt are still white T-shirts. They don't change you as a person, right? Now, what are you
Mhm.
doing inside? If the $5 t-shirt person has a terrible interior life, and they're doing horrible things, and they're having moral issues, and they basically have, an unattractive interior, but then you have the person wearing the $80 shirt, but their interior life is better, right? So you basically, you can't base it off of what's going on outside. Just like you said on the
Yeah.
house, right? The
Mhm.
house, oh, that's a really great house, but the inside isn't good. Oh, well, it's an okay house. It's kind of older, a little beat up, but the inside, filled with love, filled with respect for people, filled with family, filled with all the good things, with laughter, filled with Jesus, filled with all the things that make up a good home,
Mhm.
right?
Yes, and there's so many different possibilities with it, so it's, like, really not up to us, to make that judgment, but God sees that. He knows what's in our heart, and I think about the story of the mustard seed,
Mhm.
so the mustard seed is tiny, like, that doesn't look like it's gonna do anything, we get caught up in the exterior, "Oh, if it's bigger, it's better. If it's shinier, more spotted."
Right.
Like, we think we use our vision for that, but God's vision is beyond that. It's like he sees what's in us to know what kind of fruit we're going to bear. And there's really, you know, um, when we think about that, even like within our family or within ourselves and our lives, that ultimately ends up showing itself, right? So like
Right.
you can make that exterior look however, but the inside is it's going to catch up to what's on the outside
Right. Right.
event,
At some point, I mean,
Mhm.
either in our earthly life, or come the time of death, the time of judgment, it's going to catch up with us, right? Like, there isn't going to be a way to escape it outside of an interior metanoia, where we turn around, we choose God, we're contrite, we go to confession, we find our way to God and rebuild that relationship. But
Mhm.
so that's the only way to do it. Other than that, yeah, it's going to be with us.
Well, and I think, when we are trying to make sense of our lives, I think, does the average person sit and think and wonder about certain things? That's why these stories are so good. It kind of puts a little pause in your day, and you think, oh, well, wait, where do I fall into that? Can I give this a minute or a couple minutes to think about and sort of analyze my own life. And, but the average person, maybe they're just sort of going along, and you want to think about like the influences that are in your life that make you aware of these things. So like some people have positive influences that remind them, oh, don't focus on that. This is what's really important. And some people don't understand that, but they maybe could be taught that, or, encouraged by somebody else to maybe they're maybe not doing it in a malicious way, but maybe, kind of open their eyes to it, and be able to share the real moral of, or I guess a better way to live your life, not focusing on that. It's hard because the world constantly is about appearances,
Right.
and so that's like the disguise of the world. And when we anytime we go to the Bible, we're constantly reminded of how wrong that is. So that's one of those wonderful things we can do. These would pair up so nicely with certain parables
Right.
or chapters from the Bible that just really they cut to the chase. There's no, oh, I wonder, they just say it like it is because they need to get that point across. And I feel like these stories are short, but they really come from the wisdom that's out there, that don't get caught up in these things, and kind of look for what's inside. Some people, I think there's another side of that too, where some people, if they are trying so hard to not focus on the outside and only on the inside, they might be missing some things too. So
Sure.
so while this fox is like correcting him and thinking he's better, he's sort of judging the person too, so he could be
Right.
going
Right.
in a different direction. But uh either way, I think either the fox or the leopard could learn from one another in the story.
I like that you said the reminds you sort of the parables in the Bible. I think about from Luke 18, the parable of the Pharisee and the tax collector. They both came into the temple, and you have the Pharisee who is, you know, very like, I am a good man. I tithe. I have not done this. I am not like these people. The Pharisee is supposed to be representative of faith at the time and religion at the time for the Jewish people, and he's just very loud about it, right? And so it's sort of what you were saying, the interplay between the fox and the leopard. He's the Pharisee in that parable is judging everyone else. I am not like them. Then you have the tax collector who won't even lift his head and comes
Mhm.
in and
Mhm.
says, woe is me, a sinner. And he understands his interior life is one where he needs to, humble himself and say, I'm sorry, forgive me. And so, what does Jesus say? He said, okay, which one of these two men was in the right? And it's
Mhm.
not the Pharisee,
Mhm.
you know? So again, what the the Pharisee wants the external to be what's important. And the tax
Mhm.
collector is like, my interior life is not a good one.
Mhm.
It's not about what people see of me, but I'm not good. And he's blessed for his admission, for his honesty.
Yeah, and I think that with the mind, with wisdom in the mind, that definitely comes into play. I see it a lot where, uh, oh, I know more than you, or I've experienced this, or maybe I read this and you didn't read that, and there's that condescension that happens sometimes with people, even in, like you said, if, oh, I go to church and I know this and this, but then the person that maybe is outside the church that really could use help, they just walk right past. They got to get to their car because they're, going somewhere else, and they're following the rules of what appears to be the right way, or the better way, even just with things that are trying to be holy and for God, and then looking past the things that are obvious that they should care for, because they're thinking, oh, I did everything right. So I guess what I feel like is if you are connected to God, your mind and your heart, he sort of will guide you if you're doing something positive and for him, and those things will make sense. Like you'll see with clarity almost what you can do for other people around you or just in your own life. And it's like when we put these other things ahead of it, I want to be the smartest, or I want to be the richest, or I want to be the prettiest. Those things somehow leapfrog God. So instead of following him, you're thinking, I want all of these things. Oh, and then here's God.
Right.
Maybe fourth on my list,
Right. Right.
And so, yeah, I can see it in a bunch of different perspectives, what looks good, or even like with our mind and what we study, and if we know more than somebody else, how that can, you know, put you at an advantage. But how do you use that as an advantage? Do you make other people around you feel bad, or do you use it to help them?
Right. And you made excellent point there. And again, another good reference from what you said to what is clearly said in Scripture comes from Romans 12. And it says, "Do not conform yourselves to this age, but be transformed by the renewal of your mind, that you may discern what is the will of God, what is good and pleasing and perfect." And what do we have the fox say at the end? "And how much more beautiful than you am I, who am decorated not in body, but in mind," right? And we're told in Scripture, right? Like, don't be caught up in what's happening around you. Don't be caught up in fashion. Don't be caught up in money, wealth, power, fame, fortune. What's the latest trend? What's the latest show? Don't be caught up in any of that. Make make your interior life, make your mind focused on what is good, focus on God, and then you will be fine, right? So if you fill up with good things, right, garbage in, garbage out. So
Mhm.
if you switch that to put in good things, outcomes, in your exterior life,
Mhm.
what is godly, what is holy, what is right. So we fill ourselves up, fill our minds with God, then we can move forward and have a very a very rewarding life compared to those who you said sort of leapfrog God for the ways of the world.
Mhm. I was just watching a show, and it was really interesting because it was taking a person that was very humble, and they got exposed to competition, and that competition overtook them. And so it's like, no, this was such a good person. And, they had everything figured out, and the competition got to them and they changed. And suddenly, you see, in the show, it wasn't necessarily God, but if we were using that, God sort of moving down, now this competition is above, what their values were. And so it just sort of reminds me, this is a constant work that we all have to do, because a person could start out really good and then along the way end bad, or they could start out bad and then learn something, and then their life continue on in a good way. So I feel like there's just that constant connection we have to keep, because even if we start out one way or the other, we can easily get distracted and moved in different directions away from God or closer. And it's like, wow, we all have that opportunity, so like who you are today, you could be completely different a year from now, 5 years from now, or you could look back and think, oh, wow, I remember, I did these things and it was all so good. Like, what changed? And unfortunately, that competition, I see it in this story, and it would be neat if we could rewrite it, So, like, how would I like to change this story to tell children, So, like, would the fox say, you are those spots are amazing, and I'm so happy for you, and just kind of leave it at that, and not make it a competition.
Hmm.
and then maybe the leopard would say something back, well, but you fox, you're so smart on the inside. Not that we have to do that self-promotion
Right.
for each other,
Right.
just allow, uh, I remember a saying, and I can't get it exactly right, but there's enough good for everyone. And, it's never ending with God. So don't feel like you have to cut somebody down in order for you to feel good and loved. That there's enough, almost like a parent talking to their kids. They're all so different, and you love them all. There's enough love for everybody, so to like maybe be able to teach the fox and then maybe, the leopard. It'd be interesting though. Like there's a if we were doing one of our brainstorming sessions, we could take this and turn it into a neat story
Sure.
for
Sure.
them to learn from.
Based off The Fox and the
Yeah.
Leopard, a new story.
Yes, and
I I uh I was appreciating how you were saying about the life journey and someone who could start out good or start out bad and then find their way or fall off the path. And I think the the point about sort of a life in goodness, a life in God, right, and discovering what's important is ongoing.
mhm,
And one decision to follow God is not sort of the end of the story. It very well could be the beginning, but it's not the end, right?
mhm,
Accepting God, into your life or being baptized, right? Especially, infants who are baptized, they're still trying to form their reason, they're still trying to form their intellect, they still have a lot to learn to increase knowledge and wisdom. Who knows where the young person goes, those who are baptized in infancy, what decisions will they make? How will they interpret life? What will they be taught? Will they be more of a fox? Will they be more of a leopard? Will it
mhm.
be a little bit of both, back and forth? They were really good foxes through their youth, and then they left home and they turned more into a leopard. But then they came back to being a fox,
Yeah,
later
yeah,
in life. So it's a ongoing, lifelong sort of journey, sufferings, struggles, good times, uh, success, failures, wins, losses, ups and downs, but
mhm,
trying to always stay in the good mindset and say, I need God in my life. I need
mhm.
an interior life that is predisposed to God and not to the ways of the world.
Well, and we're not perfect. Humans just we're not perfect, and there's gonna be times where, yeah, you're like one or the other, and I guess the best part of the story is that God knows that, and he's always there to just, you know, nudge you back in whichever direction it is. So it's like, you know, to I guess understand, tell yourself, I'm not always gonna make the right decision, or I'm not always gonna look at this the right way, but even if it's that every Sunday, you're back at church and you evaluate and reflect and you think, "Ooh, wait, why did I do this?" Or why did, and sort of recenter yourself. Or like when you go to confession, sort of acknowledge those moments and kind of bring yourself back to it. And I think like our personal experiences help each other a lot. So if you have a really good friend or spouse, your own children or aunts and uncles, however it might be, sometimes their lives are sort of like a testimony that you can see, oh, okay, they did this and then, oh, and then this happened. Okay, I don't want to do that. Or, I'm going to learn by what they did and make this decision now. And it's interesting. It really is. That's like the journey of our life, that it's up and down, sideways, and we don't know what's right for us sometimes, but I think focusing on our heart, really connecting our heart, it does. I think our minds play into that. They always say too, like put your put your ear to your heart, and what does it say? Like what is coming out of it? and making decisions that way and sort of searching for answers, just being still and letting God put that in your heart, for you to understand what you want to do next, how you want to make this decision. But I think treating others, we're all in it together, you know, uh, thinking about, the important commandments, treating each other, taking care of your neighbor. And I think that that gives us the grace that's needed when we go back to that and think, am I comparing myself to someone? Am I judging them? Or how am I treating them? What's coming out of me? So like if I'm doing those actions, then I need to go back in and, sort of rearrange things
Hmm.
interiorly,
Right. Right.
that comes straight from the top.
Comes from the boss.
Yes, very good.
Yeah. I think that the more that we try to shape and sculpt our interior life to be a little bit more like the fox, to look for interior beauty, the more that can resonate with the people that we encounter, right?
Mhm.
Because if we're genuine to that interior self, right? Because it's very easy to like, okay, this is what I believe, this is who I am, but then you get into a crowd, right? And you're sort of pressured by the circumstances. You're like, oh, yeah, whatever you guys say. But yeah, I think that the more we sort of practice that, work out those interior Jesus muscles, the more that comes out, and the more that we can sort of impact the people around us.
And
Well, go ahead.
oh, I was just gonna say this a commercial that I saw that reminds me of this story. It was for book covers. And I thought, what is this? Because I'm a reader. I love, and so, if you're at the beach or at a bookstore, you can see well, so these are book covers that look like it's a certain book, but there's nothing inside. So people can put their phone in there. They could put another book that maybe they don't want anyone to know that they're reading inside of this book cover. So I'm looking at this and I thought, wow, this is, so what we're talking about, what's on the outside is a disguise, and then we don't really know what's going on the inside, you
Right.
know? And so I'm like, wow, who came up with that? And I guess maybe some people could look at it as a benefit, no, I don't want anyone to know what I'm reading. But, it really got me thinking about, how we view the exterior, how that comes across, impressions that are made, in all parts of our life, right? And but then how do we know what's on the inside? Would that change our view of the person? Should we care? Is it any of our business and that sort of thing? And uh I guess it just goes back to, God being all knowing. It's like, hey, you can do all those things, but he knows.
God knows.
He knows, right? He knew where Adam was. You can't run away. And so I think we have that misconception that we can, you can maybe fool a few people, but, there's no getting out of what God knows.
That's right.
So I
Exactly
thought that
right.
was really interesting.
Well said. Ladies and gentlemen, we have been reviewing The Fox and the Leopard by Aesop. Again, if you have not listened to our recording, it was read by Ian Floyd. Go to our Facebook, go to our YouTube, and track that down. Um, and I've been having the extreme pleasure of chatting with Karrie. Karrie, thanks for being here for this episode. It's great to talk with you.
Yeah, you always have wonderful thoughts and ideas, and so it was such a pleasure to be here with you.
Thank you. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, we are so glad that you have joined us for the table of content. We hope that you have enjoyed this episode, and we hope that you will return again and again because we have much more content, much more to talk about here at Weird One Body Audio Theater. So please come back and continue to listen and watch. And until the next time, be good, stay safe. Peace.